And tonight we'll be continuing our conversation about the toxic relationship cure, meeting with the author, Jerry Kantor, who's an acupuncturist and homeopath, author of a number of really interesting books with great academic credentials, including teaching associate at Harvard Medical School. And we're continuing our talk about toxic relationships. In fact, sometimes these relationships are so toxic that people can actually die from them. And Jerry, can you give us an example of that from your own practice?
Yeah, I can. It began like this. One of my clients after we had a session, said to me, "Jerry, I have a niece who has anorexia nervosa. Can you help with that?" I said, "Well, I think so. I'll try and see what I can do."
Often homeopathy can help with that, by the way. It's,
Yeah. So she worked it out that her niece was brought to my office by her parents, who I'd never met before. And the parents, they looked a little bit remote. And they sat and kind of looking at me with their arms crossed through this whole time. Anyway, the girl, a 13-year-old girl, excelled at everything. She was at the top of her class and academically. She had lots of friends. She had lots of interests. Absolutely not a thing wrong with this girl, except for the fact that she wasn't eating. And she was dropping weight like crazy. And people were alarmed. She was thrown off her gymnastics team. She was thrown off that, and the doctors were really quite worried. She just was not eating. It was a challenge. So talking to her, asking her what's going on, she said, "No, everything's fine, absolutely nothing." Wouldn't admit to anything. So I'm digging around. Do you have any symptoms? Do you notice anything about yourself that doesn't feel good? Well, once in a while I get a stomach ache. Well, can you give me some words? Describe this to me, this stomach ache. And she said, "Well, it feels like something is collapsing inward. But I suspected this remedy, arsenicum album, which is conventionally known as, for anxiety. But this case gave me a little bit more insight into it, because I was thinking really seriously about what it meant to want to be collapsing inward. And I decided on intuition to interpret that symptom. And I think what it meant was that she was trying to get back to the safety of the womb. Again, all her pathology was concentrated there. And it's a homeopath called a delusion, a total delusion. The psyche thinks, yeah, I'll be safe if I go way back to my point of origin. I'll be nice and tight there and safe. But it's clearly completely insane. You do that, you will die. You cannot live. That was all I knew. And I gave this remedy, arsenicum album. Next thing I know, a couple of weeks go by, and I haven't heard anything. But I hear from the aunt what's going on in the family. And the girl is eating. She's eating. But no one's happy about the girl. She's also talking. She's talking about secrets in the family or things that she was not supposed to talk about. Everybody's very angry, and they're furious at me. They are furious at me. I didn't have the wherewithal or or the power, frankly, to have told the whole family to go for ecological family counseling, because this was a family ecology problem. And the way I look at it now is, as long as she kept her mouth shut, which meant two things: also not talking and not eating. From her standpoint, the features of that arsenicum remedy state were expressed, which has to do with making sure that the entire family is fine by being quiet. She maintained the safety of her family, and certain kinds of secrets. I think this is all at the subconscious level, by the way. And homeopaths also think about arsenicum, that kind of perfectionism that is emblematic of a developmental problem where you do not have a rebellion. Or you have a failed rebellion. You're overly identified with the needs of others, of your family, and then you can't separate yourself from the family. So the remedy actually prompted that to happen.
In a healthy way. It's like a healthy rebellion.
The family didn't like it, but that's not my problem. She was my client, not the family, although the family should have gone for counseling. But that was a very illuminating case for me, and I'm proud that she took that remedy, and I think it saved her life.
And probably her aunt was able to support her, I bet, and advocate for her, that she had at least one person she could talk to.
She had one person in her corner, yeah.
Yes.
And those parents, consciously or unconsciously, were toxic in that they were willing, again, some things are very, very deep. At a subconscious level, she was being the sacrificial lamb to preserve the ecology of that family, or some kind of secret, some door that they did not want to have open. And I have no idea what it was. And in terms of treating, it didn't matter that I knew it or not.
Right. Yeah. So this is a great example of how homeopathic remedies can help people find their authentic voice, like find their authentic self, and how sometimes in the big picture, the homeopathic treatment is healthy for the person and ultimately healthy for the family, but in the short run, it can be problematic and sometimes even dangerous. And I'm thinking of another remedy, staphysagria, which we use for suppressed anger. And the person who needs staphysagria a lot of times comes from the toxic parent situation of perhaps an alcoholic father who's violent. And the child thinks, I have to kind of keep my head below the trenches because I don't want to trigger anything that's going to make dad hit mom. And then it becomes, I have to be a really, really, really good girl. And I can't let any of my own feelings show because I don't want to do anything that's going to set dad off. And so you get the adult staphysagria who is just, her anger is so suppressed. And so she's trying so hard to be a good girl, to please others. Meanwhile, the anger can be building up like this volcano inside. And we have to be very careful, as you know, when we give staphysagria. I'm saying this partly because I bet there are people in the audience who are going to want to run out to the health food store and get some. It's right there in the health food store. But it can be tricky if there's a lot of suppressed anger. I'm thinking of one of my clients. She was in her 50s. She was a writer. And she had been married for quite a while to a man who had, I don't know if he was like this when they first were married, but he was in full-blown bipolar disorder and was becoming increasingly violent. And she had to really hold on to her reactions to him because she was actually afraid of him. And so I always ask, like, so why are you staying in this marriage? Well, she had a good reason. She did feel sorry for him. He was on her health insurance. He couldn't get a job. She said, he's going to be homeless. If I divorce him, he will be homeless. And she had such a good heart. She felt sorry for him. But I gave her the tiniest possible dose of staphysagria. And unfortunately, what happened was it triggered a volcanic eruption from her and such a violent reaction from him, she had to call the police, get a restraining order. It did break up the marriage, ultimately better for her. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to him. Sad situation. So this is just an example of the remedy staphysagria helping people find their authentic voice. And in the long run, it's more healing, it's better for the person.
Yeah, I can add a few more things to that. They suppress their indignation, but they also display, the anger comes out in a displaced fashion.
Yes.
So they'll either slam doors or want to throw something. Yeah, you have to be very careful. You don't want to give that remedy in a situation where there can be retaliation and they can be abused. But most of the time, people have baggage, and they're in that state when they are adult. Well, not, I shouldn't say most of the time, but when it is that this is purely baggage, that they're holding their feelings in, and the situation is no longer dangerous, then it's very, very liberating to give it. I mean, I gave it, one of the first times I gave staphysagria to this woman, she went off, told off every man in her life, her husband, her brother, her father, her uncle, and she felt great, and it turned out to be fine. So they find out that they can have, in terms of my toolbox analogy, they don't have to use that claw end of the hammer anymore. They can turn the hammer around and boom, use it and put it away, and it feels good, which is completely different.
And actually, we can think of the Me Too movement as this huge volcanic eruption of suppressed feelings, where staphysagria is often used for sexual abuse, for the past history of sexual abuse, where the woman, either she's a child or even an adult, who's powerless because she's dependent on the man for her career, for her job. And so she's helpless and powerless and builds up this anger. And then all blows up, which is kind of what's happening now with the Me Too movement.
With the sexuality piece, there's a part we can talk about a little bit. I mean, because staphysagria women in the literature, they have a healthy libido.
Yes.
They're drawn to sex. At the same time, this feeling of violence inflames that situation. So like the act of being penetrated in intercourse has an inflammatory aspect to it. And so they are prone to honeymoon cystitis. It's a major remedy for cystitis.
Right.
Comes up like that. Also, anything that's penetrating, actually, like a violation, like mosquitoes often like them, or they have a very big...
And it's a remedy for mosquito bites and preventing mosquito bites.
If they're in the staphysagria state, or dentistry, which with that drill going in there, if you have that kind of a mindset, you will find dentistry very, very violating.
I had a client, a woman, again in her 50s, who had all of her teeth were rotten, and she desperately needed dental work, and I asked her why she wasn't going to the dentist. In this tiny, soft voice, she said, I was abused as a child, and the mouth was the area of violation. Yeah.
Back to the teeth, there's something else about that too, because in the Materia Medica, which is where the remedies are described, it often comes up that people who need that remedy have decay, lots of dental decay. Why is that? And my feeling about that is that the teeth, well, the bones of the body are our inner structure, our inner integrity, right? Which, when you don't need that remedy, is pretty firm. People who need that remedy, they have their inner integrity violated, right? They're very sensitive to insult also. And the teeth are the one place that our bones are visible in the body. And so that's interesting that
It's
they
vulnerable.
tend to have that. Starlets, Hollywood starlets, like have gleaming white teeth, because what they're actually saying, sorry to disabuse you of your illusion here with Hollywood stars, but that actually is saying, look at my wonderful inner integrity. I am a very desirable woman.
Yeah. And also, sometimes the teeth are worn down because they're clenching, because when there's a suppressed anger, a lot of times it shows up
That's
as
right.
tightness in their jaw. They're like clenching their teeth to suppress their anger, and they can end up grinding down on their teeth.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then you mentioned libido. You can have a little girl who's been sexually abused, and she's like sexually stimulated, and she becomes hypersexual. She may become the promiscuous teenager. And sometimes when we see a little girl who's hypersexual, of course we suspect sexual abuse, and we use Staphysagria for that,
Yeah.
and also for recurring urinary tract infections. Why would a little girl, I mean, it can be from bubble bath, but we have to think, is there another reason why this little girl is getting recurring urinary tract infections, for which Staphysagria is a great remedy?
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're very
Yeah.
emotionally sensitive. They tend to cry a lot. It's another big remedy for poor self-esteem.
Mhm.
Often an adult will come with endless tales of mistreatment. You go, oh my God, one after another, one after another.
Mhm.
And that's another tell for that remedy.
Right, right. In fact, when you talk about the clients who come in needing Staphysagria, one of the ways I can tell is that I start getting angry on their behalf, because they're telling me about all the abuse they've suffered, and they don't, for whatever reason, they can't speak up for themselves, they can't act on their behalf, and I want to give them suggestions. I'm not there to give them suggestions, I'm there to give them a remedy, but I want to, hook them up with a domestic violence victims network or something, I want to intervene, and I can feel my own anger. It's like coming up because I'm resonating with the anger that they've suppressed, that they're denying, right? Yeah?
One more thing.
Yeah.
I found
Yeah.
that when I explain this remedy to someone,
Mhm.
and I use my toolbox analogy, I say,
Right.
you have a dysfunctional relationship to your anger.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to find that when you take this remedy, you will no longer be like vexed, this kind of feeling. It's going to become more natural, and you're going to have a more,
Mhm.
it's going to come out more naturally. Pretty much every time they turn to me and say, Jerry, oh my God, are you going to turn me into a bitch? Something like that.
Oh,
Can I
interesting.
say that word
Uh-huh.
here? The feeling that there's a real fear of that, and a fear
Yeah.
of the anger that, and of course, this is more common with women who are taught, even today, raised to be seen and not heard. It's much more part of the upbringing of a girl to be suppressed. And they fear that, but I say, you're gonna find out that it's okay. You can have, everybody's gonna be happier, including you, when you have a natural relationship with your anger and use the hammer part of the hammer instead of the claw.
Right. So to talk about another group that's suppressed, African Americans, I have a friend who's a homeopathic family practice physician in Minneapolis, and he told me that Staphysagria is his go-to remedy for high blood pressure. It's not in our books really for that, but he says it works every time. So the two of us think there's got to be a lot of suppressed anger. There's a lot of like the Midwesterners who are trying to be really nice, go along to get along. We suspect that's why they need it. But it made me think about the fact that African American men are known to be the most susceptible to high blood pressure, and doctors tend to go in the direction of they're eating too much salt. They're like getting blamed for eating too much salt. And in talking to a very dear old friend of mine, who's an African American man I've known since our Harvard student days, in talking to him about this, I realized that it could be that it's actually suppressed anger that's leading to the Staphysagria high blood pressure state. And here's how he has explained it and how I've observed him. He is very high in his profession. He's an engineer, so senior in his profession that he often, no matter what the work situation is, he's usually the only black in the room. And no matter where he's working, he finds this subtle, he'll be the only person not invited to a meeting, the only person not included on an email consistently, but if he were to bring it up with human resources, they would find an excuse for each time. Could he make a case out of that he's being discriminated against? It's not enough for that, but it's enough for him to notice, enough for him to get angry, and enough for him to know he cannot show that anger. He has to be a team player. He has to go along with it. But I can see it's like the tea kettle that's starting to build up a head of steam. I can see the anger rising. at the helplessness of his situation. He knows if he gets another job, it's going to be the same thing, and he could wreck his career if he were to try to get a lawyer, and file a discrimination suit. So, Staphysagria, yeah.
I had this,
Yeah.
my own story with needing it, as mostly
Yeah.
it's women who need it, but it was very instructive when I needed it myself. I had, in 1996, I had come up with a certain idea of how to describe homeopathic remedies that was novel. And I thought, wow, I think I'll write this up.
Based
So-
on your connection with acupuncture.
Yes,
five elements of
it came out of
acupuncture.
a-
So really unique
Yeah,
insight.
this is not the toolbox, it was something a little bit different. But I wrote it up and I sent it to the Journal of the American Institute of Homeopathy, which is the medical journal, and I'm not even a physician, but it was, to my astonishment, they accepted it word for word, didn't change a thing. I was over the moon. My God, I'm just doing this a short time, maybe I'm pretty good. So I said, well, when's it going to come out? And he said, next month, however, next issue. So I waited and waited, and issue came out, and I'm not in there. I said, what's going on? So I called them up, and they said, well, yeah, we got caught up, something else came in, it'll be the next issue. I said, fine, I can wait. And next issue came out, it wasn't in there again. Okay, this went on a couple of months, for a couple of issues, and I started to boil. Now, the situation was a Staphysagria situation. I was feeling, I can't get angry at these people. I can't. They've done this wonderful thing for me.
And you're dependent on them.
And I'm
to
dependent
publish
on
it.
them, but I'm also, I have no outlet for this. I have no outlet. And around that time, I started developing like pain down my arm, which does appear in that remedy Materia Medica. And my wife said, "You having a heart attack?" Sent me to the emergency room, had myself checked out, and everything was fine. Around that time, I gave myself the remedy. It's very hard to treat yourself. But I lucked out, and I did take the remedy, and now the joke is, well, what do you think happened after I took the remedy? Okay, the article came out.
That's good. I thought you were going to say you got angry at the journal editors.
No,
No.
this is
It
what we call a
resolved it.
synchronicity in homeopathy,
Right, yeah.
that somehow my energy changed, or no one outside homeopathy will think that way, but we see that all the time, that like with the Ignatia person who suddenly says, your remedy did nothing, but everybody's being nice to me. Something about my energy maybe released something, and then the article came out, so I was perfectly fine.
Right, right. And one more final thing about Staphysagria, because this gets to a home use. You talked about the quality of being penetrated, and we use it for example, a woman who needs to have that medical exam where a tiny camera is put up into the bladder or put up into the uterus, or when there's surgery in the abdominal area or in the pelvic organs, and somehow the energy body feels penetrated, almost like a rape.
Yeah.
And so we use Staphysagria for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's like a home care use of Staphysagria.
The only last thing I would say about someone in that state is, if you meet them, is that they're overly sweet.
Yes.
Look how nice I am, how sweet, don't hurt me. Why would anybody hurt someone as sweet as me?
But you feel it's inauthentic when you're talking to them.
Yeah.
You just feel that sickly sweet.
Yeah,
You think
yeah,
there's something
it's
going on
too
here
much.
beneath the surface. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is an important concept in homeopathy, the concept, what we call the obstacle to the cure.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes the toxic person is the obstacle who has to be removed. A simple way to think about this is Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, used to say, if somebody's sick from living in a moldy basement, get them out of the moldy basement. Your first move isn't to give them a remedy for the moldy basement. Your first move is to get them into a healthy environment. And a lot of times when somebody comes in and they're suffering from a toxic relationship, really the answer is for them to get out of the relationship, and sometimes giving them the remedy. We've mentioned this, that giving them the remedy helps them get in touch with their authentic feelings. It brings forward their voice, and it also brings forward their sense of options. How many times I've had a woman, I mostly treat women, I've had a woman come in and describe her life situation, which is terrible. It may involve, thinking of a woman who had a boss who was extremely abusive, and this was in the days when there was no health care coverage for pre-existing conditions. She had a child with a congenital problem that cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical treatment. If she had left her job, she would never have gotten coverage for her child, and her boss knew it, was being totally, like, verbally and emotionally abusive to her. Or you might have a woman who's in a very abusive marriage. So many times I find myself asking her, like, why are you staying in this situation? And the woman will have this list of reasons why she couldn't possibly leave. And I give her Staphysagria or other appropriate remedy. And she'll come back to the follow-up and she'll say, well, I found a way. I'm divorcing him, or I'm leaving the job. It's like, it was always possible, but in her mind, it wasn't. She was like trapped in her mind, and the remedy opens that up, opens up her possibilities for life. Yeah.
That's one of the things I absolutely adore about homeopathy, and which has taught me a lot about not just medical care, but all kinds of interactions in which I can have a say. If you empower someone, it's so much more empowering
Yeah.
to create possibilities and to browbeat them and to give them advice. But we're always tempted to do that.
Yeah.
But the remedies open because good treatment enlarges awareness. On so many levels, and then people find the wherewithal, and the energy. Their energy changes, and things look completely different.
They feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
That's another thing, is they feel that things are possible because they feel they deserve better in life.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times you want life to be better for the person, but if they feel like they're too small or they don't deserve it, they're not going to make those moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.